You're listening to the Millionacres Podcast. Our mission at Millionacres is to educate and empower investors to make great decisions and achieve real estate investing success. We provide regular content and perspective for everyone, from those just starting out to seasoned pros with decades of experience. At Millionacres, we work every day to help you demystify real estate investing,
Hello, I'm Deidre Woolard, an editor at Millionacres, and thank you so much for tuning in to the Millionacres Podcast. You've probably seen a lot of news stories lately about single-family rentals, about how institutional investors are buying up a lot of properties. I feel like sometimes that news can be discouraging for the smaller investor, but there's really a lot of opportunity out there in the rental property market. And so to get fired up about that today, I'm chatting with Mike Hills of Atlas Real Estate. He owns over 50 units. He's got condos, townhouses, single-family homes, duplex, quadplex, trailer park, you name it, he's got the flavors. Welcome. How are you, Mike?
I am great, Deidre. Thank you for having me. And, like you said, don't be discouraged. There's always a way to buy. There's always a time to buy. As long as you're buying for the long term and not trying to be a market timer, you're going to be just fine.
Definitely don't be a market timer. I love that. Well, let's dive into it because this market is, I think on every podcast I do, I say this market is crazy. This market is bananas. It's booming. We've run out of superlatives. It's a very hot market. That's putting a lot of stress on investors who are trying to find a good opportunity. What can people do?
So I think first and foremost, you have to learn what actually is an opportunity. And what I would say is one of the things that we really focus on is markets that are opportunities and trying to define what an opportunity is for me versus what an opportunity is for any of our buyers that are helping, whether they're buyers, sellers, and, because in this market, it's a great market to sell in, but it can also be a great market to buy in depending on where you're buying and what we're looking for. So what I usually do is define goals first and then markets that can meet those goals second. And I am a buyer of real estate. I've purchased 4 transactions totaling a little over $3 million in the last 12 months. And I'm under contract on a $1.2 million asset in a city called Littleton, which is a suburb of Denver. Right now, I close. I think it's going to be the last week of August, first week of September. That's still up in the air because the seller has a little bit extra time written into the contract. So, but I am a buyer in this market. But let me say it this way. In today's world, we're using the sniper rifle approach, buying very targeted, specific investments versus the shotgun approach, which is what we used in 14, 15, 16, and 17, which is buy everything. Today, what we buy and where we buy are very, very important questions.
Yeah, I think that is a great thing to focus on. You're absolutely right. When everything is cheap and below value, you kind of can't go wrong. Right now, when we're pretty much priced to perfection, you can go wrong pretty easily. So tell me a little bit about the transactions. Were you buying all the way through the pandemic, or did you take a pause, and did you see your investors take a pause as well?
So when the pandemic first hit, we told everybody take a pause. And even our deals, basically what we did is we didn't cancel anything. We just pushed it out 30 to 60 days. Because one of the advantages that we have at Atlas is we also manage roughly 5,000 doors in a few different states. So what we were doing is not necessarily on the real estate side, trying to figure out what was going on the tenant payment side. I don't know if you saw yesterday, the CDC extended the eviction moratorium, not across the board, but there's some different criteria on it. And, I haven't spent enough time digging into it to truly understand it, but that's what we were kind of doing, saying, okay, what is going to happen with tenants, with rents? At the same time, some of the very big institutional investors out there, we work with a lot of these, and without getting into who's who, there was 3 different ones, all said when the last pandemic hit, and I want to say it was the swine flu or bird flu, call it 2010, 2011, the stock market crashed, but then it came roaring back, and the real estate market stayed relatively the same as what it was doing, and the same thing happened this time. And, in hindsight, it's always 2020. But some of the biggest institutional people out there, researchers, said they called what was going to happen. Now, they didn't call the craziness of 2020. They didn't say there would be no seasonality, anything like that until we got into September, October. What they did say was that generally speaking, when the market crashes and a pandemic hits, it affects the stock market faster and harder than it does real estate, because real estate is just more of a slow burn than, say, the stocks are. And they were right. And then in terms of specifically, probably by mid-June, we were buying real estate again, because the pandemic hit, really froze everything first week of April, last week of March-ish, and we froze. And we told all of our buyers, hey, freeze. We don't know what's going to happen. Freeze. By early summer again, June, July, we were buying. The transactions that I did personally, I sold a single family home in, I want to say, the second or third week of September, 1031 exchanged. So I refinanced a single family home in August, 1031 exchanged a single family home in September, and then bought assets in October, November.
Interesting. So doing my research on you, I noticed that you talked before about going through the great financial crisis. You were, in the throes of it when all of that went down. This situation is so different than that. I don't believe this is a housing bubble, but I have to ask, what are you seeing right now? And what did you learn from then about the power of just not freaking out and holding on?
Patience. All right. So here's a story that I like to tell. My dad passed a couple years ago, but so 2010, let's rewind to the 2000s. I bought my first asset September 1st, 2001. I did what people call house hacking today. Millennials invented that word. I didn't make it up, but that's what I did. I bought 2001, I bought 2004, I bought 2005, bought 2007, and 2008. 2008, my wife and I got married. We had 4 rentals and a primary residence. By 2010, she was pregnant with our first child. And my father says to me, who is a financial planner, stock market guy, his whole career, whole life, says to me, hey, Mike, you're upside down. I think it's time to sell, regroup. I had some other stuff going on. At the time, I had a business partner. He and I owned 2 liquor stores, and I was building a casino in a little town called Blackhawk, which is outside of Denver. And I got kicked in the teeth on those deals. But my real estate was quietly okay. And my dad's like, okay, give all your houses back, give up, start over. You have a young family on the way. Now's the time. If you want to do it, now's the time. And I am a stubborn person. And I said, Dad, I'm out of the casino and the liquor stores. It was painful, expensive lesson, but I've learned from it and I'm out of it. My rentals, my tenants are paying me. Granted, it's sporadic and my houses aren't worth anything. They're worth basically what I owe on them right now, but they're paying rent. My debt's being reduced. Why don't I just stay in? He's like, just start over. And I didn't. Like I said, I'm stubborn. By 2017, right before my dad died, he actually was at my house in Denver. He lives in California. He says to me, I'm really glad I talked you into keeping all those rentals all those years ago. And I was like, such a dad. That is not what you said. But more specifically, I bought my first house September 1st, 10 days before September 11th. I bought again in 2004, 2005, 7, and 8. Market crashed 2008, 2009. And what it did is give me a longer-term real estate trajectory perspective, because this is not a get-rich-quick scheme. I'm not buying to make a 10 or 20 or 30% return over the short term and turn around and sell. I'm buying targeted, specific assets that I believe are going to long-term make money. I buy as though I'm not going to sell for 20 years. Now, does that mean I won't sell? No, I'll sell stuff, but it means my thought process goes into this, because I'm not worried about what happens tomorrow or, the September 11th or the crash of 2008 or 2020 COVID. I'm not worried about that stuff, because I'm not going to sell next year or the year after anyway. I'm buying as though I'm never going to sell. And if I go in with that mindset, what happens in the short term doesn't freak me out. And that's what we see a lot of our investors do, is they lose confidence and they lose faith and they make mistakes out of fear. And frankly, I've ridden ups and downs in the market, and I've been doing this 20 years. And for those of you like, oh, you're too young. Thank you, but I'm not. But I bought my first house 2.5 months after I graduated college. I graduated from University of Denver in 2001. And as they say, the rest is history. And I would do it all over again. I think the biggest mistake I made, minus the casino, is not buying more. Not truly, I trusted it. And I think the proof is in the pudding based on, the assets that I bought. I really trusted the philosophy. I didn't have anybody to ask about the philosophy. The smartest people in my life were telling me, what are you doing? Don't buy real estate. Nobody does this. And my thought was, I don't have anything to lose. What's the difference? Now today is different. I have something to lose, but it worked. And I would say for anybody out there, don't worry about today. Be forward looking and forward thinking. And if you can take that perspective, it makes whatever happens over the next 12 to 36 months. I don't want to say who cares. I don't mean to be flippant about it, but you're not buying for the next 2 or 3 years anyway. So why are you so worried?
Exactly. Yeah. Don't time the market, time your life. That's one of the things we always say. You mentioned 1031 exchanges earlier. I'm wanted to get your take on what you're thinking about current administration. There's been some talk about changing a little bit. Is that a concern for you? And are you using 1031 exchanges pretty commonly to level up in your investing?
Yes, we use 1031 exchanges very regularly. I believe, and don't quote me on this, but the last literature that I read basically said that the 1031 exchange disappearance or what the current administration is going to take away is when the gain is over $500,000. So that's my understanding of it. I have a hard time believing that Congress is going to pass that, mainly because a lot of people in Congress own real estate.
True.
And 1031 exchanges, it punishes those of us trying to spend money on the economy. But that said, because of the $500,000 limit, I'm just not that worried about it. Not saying that it's not going to happen, just saying that, smart investors, you could change the rules, and guess what? I'm going to learn how to play by your rules, and I'm going to do it better than the government does. So I don't mean to be flippant. I can't control it, so why worry about it? Until it's law, the rest of it's just fluff. Until they say, this is the new rule, then I'll deal with it. As of now, I am telling people, if you're going to 1031 exchange, I'd rather do it in 2021, because likely if they make the change, it likely won't be until 2022. Now, again, I don't have a crystal ball, but that's my gut. We're in August. I can't imagine them passing that budget and then retroactive it to January 1st. That seems unfair, if you will.
Yeah. Well, and I like what you said there about if you can't control it, if it's in the future, if it's uncertain, don't stress out about it. Don't make decisions about things that haven't happened. That is really solid advice. So one of the things I wanted to talk to you about, you're one of those people who's made the leap from like a house hack and a couple of properties to owning a lot of properties. And I feel like a lot of investors get stuck at a certain level. They own, maybe their first house, maybe they get another one, they move up, they rent out the first one. Maybe they, get a duplex or something like that. They've got maybe 5 properties. But how do you get to that level from 5 to 10 or 15 or 20? What's that path look like?
So for me, it was really twofold. It was, so again, I live in Denver proper. And for me, I was buying single family homes. And again, by 2013, I owned 9 single family homes. So, and when I say single family, one of those was a condo, one of them was a townhouse. The other, I think 8 were single family homes. Of the single family homes, I lived in one of them. The rest were rentals. And I started looking at this, and what happened is the prices were clicking up, and granted, this is still 2013, but the rents, while still good, were relatively low. And I discovered that there is these multifamily units out there that I get better rents, and not necessarily just pure cash flow. I can get better rents. I can spend the same amount or maybe a little bit more money and get more cash flow for the same kind of down payment or close to the same kind of down payment. So I started exploring that, and what's happened is, again, without saying that I'm purely a cash flow investor, because I'm not. I'm not an appreciation investor, which I would refer to as speculation, and I'm not a purely cash flow investor, which I would refer to as somebody that's ignoring appreciation. Everything that I own, I want a blend of the two. I want to buy in appreciating markets with strong cap rates, strong rents, not the best, but good enough that I can get paid 3 ways, being positive cash flow, debt reduction, and appreciation. I want all 3. And even in this market, you can find all 3. So what I did, I bought my first multifamily in 2015, January of 2015. I put the wheels in action in 2014, and I did a cash out refinance on a property that I bought the single family that I bought in 2007. Pulled money out and bought my first quadplex in January of 2015. got my feet wet doing that. By like July, August, September 2015, I was like, hey, I'm onto something here. And that is when we went full head of steam into multifamily. And again, not huge multifamily, but here's what I found. And I don't want to speak nationally, just in the markets that I'm in, which is, again, is like 4 states. What I found is that the average investor, or realtor for that matter, doesn't know much more about, they know single family homes. The average commercial broker, which is where most people think apartments have to be, the average commercial broker doesn't want to do 8-plexes and 6-plexes and 10-plexes because it's just too small of a ring. They're out there chasing the 20, 30, 40, 50 door units, and the average investor is doing single family. Well, what we created at Atlas is this niche of 2 to 10 units that we have dominated for years. And I'm not trying to be braggadocious by any stretch. I'm just simply saying, if you look at the stats from 15, 16, 17, 18, and 19, as a company, we did more units in terms of 4-plexes than any other single company. Now, put them all together, I bet they did more than us. But as one company, we did a lot of these small multifamily because people completely ignored them. It was too much for the realtor or single family investor, and it was too big for the commercial guys. So we really too small for the commercial guys and gals. So we attacked this market, and it's been. No, here's the funny thing. We're not smart anymore. Everybody's caught on to how cool these little 4-plexes are, and the fact you can still get residential financing with them. So they've caught on. So what we've done is we've changed. And so the stuff that I've been buying recently, I bought 2 4-plexes and an 8-plex in Phoenix in October, November. I bought a 9-plex in Colorado Springs in April, and I'm buying that 6-plex in Littleton, closed, like I said, at the end of this month, early September. So we've kind of morphed what we do and how we do it, and financing plays a big piece of that, the kind of financing you get, all of that stuff. But pure package, 4-plexes are really expensive now. It's not that you can't buy them, they're just insanely expensive, just like single family homes. So what we're always looking for at Atlas is sort of that next first to market, to be first to figure out a trend or to call a trend or be on the front side of the trend. So not only, again, do we get that cash flow, but we can ride that appreciation story up. As an example, that little 4-plex that I bought in January 2015, one of my neighbors just listed, and it's for just to give everybody an example, I paid $407,500 for this asset. My neighbor listed last week for $900, and I'm looking at this going, and my down payment was $90,000. Now it's been 6 years, but okay, that's an amazing return on appreciation. And as an example, when I bought the building, took it over, the rents were $700 a unit. So 7 times 4, $2,800. My rents today are just under $6,000. So that is what we target. Now, $400,000 quadplexes don't exist in the Denver metro area anymore. But that's not to say that even the lady that's selling her building for $900,000, I think you can get $6,000 a month in rent. I still think that's a pretty good buy. It's not the greatest buy, but it's a decent buy, and you're buying in an appreciating market.
Well, it's really interesting because I think one of the things that we saw during the pandemic is people moving to single-family rentals, obviously, but also a lot of the garden-style apartments. You're not the first investor I've talked to who said, those kind of low-slung, smaller apartment buildings are where people want to go, and they're a really solid investment. But you also made a really good point about 1 through 4, because there's a difference in financing 1 through 4 versus once you get past 4. Can you talk a little bit about what happens when you're buying sort of those, 6-plexes and 8-plexes that you mentioned?
General rule of thumb, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac will not insure or finance anything that's more than 4 units. So when you buy a 4-unit and under, you can get owner-occupied financing, frankly. You can buy in and put less money down, or you can get investment financing, which is generally 25% down, but you can get a 30-year fixed rate mortgage on those properties still. That's a rule, whether it's 4, 3, 2, or 1, you can get a 30-year fixed rate mortgage. Versus as soon as you jump to 5, it's considered commercial financing, and the commercial financing is, generally speaking, adjustable rate mortgages along with a balloon payment at the end. So like one of the ones I have is a 10-year fixed, 10-year balloon, but a 25-year amortization, which means I'm paying as though it's on a 25-year note. My interest rate is fixed for 10 years. But at the end of that 10-year period, I have a choice. I am forced to either pay it off, I'm forced to either refinance it, or I'm forced to sell it because I pay off the loan. Generally speaking, I don't love adjustable rate mortgages. So what I have found is I have a portfolio lender who on commercial assets will do 15 years and 10 year for that matter, fully amortized fixed rate mortgages. Means my mortgage payment is higher, but my interest rate exposure is less. And right now with interest rates being so low, I'm trying to lock in all of my interest rates because again, part of my goal is not to juice my real estate for cash flow today. I have a job, I run the brokerage at Atlas, I have a salary, my cash flow is fine. I like the 15-year fixed rate, fully amortized, even loans on commercial deals because it builds wealth. It creates wealth because it's paying off the bank faster and it gives me interest rate exposure. Now, if I was a single guy and I didn't have a job and I wanted to live on my rentals, I could do that, no problem. But that's not what I'm after today. And that's why, DJ, when you asked me a question a few minutes ago, I said, it all depends on your goals. And what are you trying to accomplish on the front side? That drives what we do on the back side. And for me, it's wealth creation. It's not necessarily cash flow. But for our listeners, if you're listening and you're 60 years old, you don't maybe care too much about wealth creation. You're looking for cash flow. So it sort of depends. The first thing we do is always sit down and say, hey, what are you trying to accomplish? What do you want out of this? Because we can tailor what you want out of what we're going to do, but that's always the first step.
Yeah, really, really smart. Having your exit strategy when you enter is really important. Well, let's shift a little bit and talk about one of my favorite topics, which is accessory dwelling units or ADUs as both an investment and I think as a solution to affordable housing. I think they're really important. I've been keeping track of different markets that are, allowing them on properties now. Why are you following them?
More units is always better. I mean, that's just simple. The more units, you can just make more money. So Denver passed an ADU policy, if you will, for lack of a better term, recently, which I follow closely. I would say that the houses that already are set up for it, home run for them. Because there are people that have built ADUs or like what I would refer to as a mother-in-law suite that are illegal, and now they're no longer illegal, which is super nice. That said, I think there is value in owning real estate where an ADU is possible. The problem becomes is that construction costs are so darn high right now that the math as of today doesn't necessarily support the building of the ADU. But that's not to say it's always going to be that way. So when you make that purchase on something that is ADU compliant or allowable, if you will, it means that you're betting on the future. Building it in the next 90 days, it's probably going to be really expensive because, everybody knows lumber has gone through the roof. Finding contractors and handyman, it's hard right now. So the cost benefit may not be worth it yet, but that's not to say that it's not always going to be that way.
True. And what are you thinking about manufactured housing, manufactured ADUs, tiny home communities? I feel like they definitely have a place. I know that communities like that, they get a bad rap, but I don't necessarily think that it's always deserved. And I think in some cases, it's a really good affordable housing solution.
I think they're fantastic. The funny thing is realtors get this wrong, as do investors a lot, and they think of manufactured homes and they confuse the term manufactured with mobile. Because from a Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac standpoint, from a financing standpoint, a manufactured home is on a permanent foundation. It's no different than a stick-built home on a permanent foundation. But most professionals, and I don't mean investors, I just mean real estate professionals, mix up those two. So I think the hard part on or the risk on a manufactured home is just understanding that when it comes to disposition or sale of the asset, just know that it will likely be a little bit harder to sell because there's a stigma around manufactured homes, which is dumb, but it just exists. Now, from a tiny house, I think tiny houses are fantastic. My wife and I have 4 kids, so tiny houses are nowhere in my future. I have zero desire to play in that game because I would pull all of my hair out if all 6 of us had to be in a little tiny house. But for single people that rent has gotten too exorbitant in big cities, tiny houses are a really cool fit.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. All right, let's take a quick break here.
Like what you're hearing? Get more real estate investing news and advice from Millionacres on Instagram at Millionacres and on Twitter at Millionacres_co.
During our break today, we are excited to have Millionacres lead investment analyst Matt Argersinger here to speak briefly about one of our newest services, Real Estate Winners. Thank you for joining us, Matt.
Thanks for having me.
So what is Real Estate Winners and who is it for?
Well, I like to think of Real Estate Winners as our answer to Stock Advisor in the real estate market. It is a service that provides recommendations on publicly traded real estate investment trusts and real estate companies. So it's a pretty big universe out there. There's over 200 REITs to choose from, and probably dozens, if not hundreds, of real estate companies are in our universe. And we provide regular investment recommendations as well as commentary on the market, educational material. And it's really designed to get anyone who's interested in investing and learning about real estate started.
So is it geared toward new investors or is it more for seasoned pros?
I think Real Estate Winners can serve both. I think if you're a new investor, maybe you're just getting started with stocks and you want to learn more about how to add real estate to your portfolio, great place to start. If you're a seasoned investor and just thinking, okay, how can I diversify my portfolio, maybe reduce the volatility in my portfolio, maybe add some income to my portfolio, then I think Real Estate Winners is a great solution for that cohort as well.
Fantastic. What are the benefits of being a member of Real Estate Winners?
Number one benefit is day one when you join, you get our top 10 investment ideas at the moment. So really right from the beginning, you know what our 10 best ideas in the publicly traded real estate market are. And then going forward on a monthly basis, you'll get a new recommendation, sometimes more than one new recommendation, as well as regular content that we're coming out. We're covering our past recommendations, providing updates, and talking about the real estate market. So it's really the full package.
Perfect. So what do you need to get started?
Really all you need is a discount brokerage account. So if you're used to buying stocks, and you probably already have that. If you haven't bought stocks in the past, of course, just open a discount brokerage account. These days, you don't even have to pay commissions. It's fantastic. So it really couldn't be easier to get started investing with Real Estate Winners.
Sounds fantastic. So how can people sign up?
Sure. They can head over to real.fool.com. That's real.fool.com.
Great. Thank you so much, Matt. I'm back with Mike Hills, and we're talking about building your rental property portfolio. So you mentioned before you live in Denver. Obviously, we've seen that market explode. At Millionacres, we have an office in Denver. Some of my team is out there, and some of them are investing. We've got one of our team members who did his first house hack recently. What are you seeing in Denver? And as someone who's been there a long time, what has that run-up been like?
Well, I mean, let's be honest. It's been fantastic. I have... Let me say it this way. So I do a radio show once a month. I just get invited on to just speak as an expert in the local market. And the joke that I make on this radio show is that when I'm sitting at this particular building that's on the 12th floor, and I look out the window and I can see the highways that cut across Denver. And the citizen in me gets really frustrated at all of the people that are clogging up our highways. The real estate investor in me is like, yes, move to my city, drive my prices up, drive my rents up. So that part I really like. Here's what I would tell you about Denver. Is Denver expensive? Yeah, it really is. But Denver is a big city. It's not nearly as expensive as some of the other big cities, nor is Phoenix. We've been buy heavy in Phoenix for a few years now. And what I do is I look at this and say, okay, from a Denver perspective, the government is relatively mild. It's not super red or super blue. It's relatively mild. Public schools, while they could always be better, comparatively across the nation, Colorado public schools are pretty decent. There's areas that they're not great, like any big city, but public schools are pretty decent. Outdoor living, quality of life, wage earners, businesses moving here, public transportation, all of these things are checks that, yes, I like to invest in Denver. And as long as those things still check off, then I'm still buy. I'm a buy in that city. Now, that said, I haven't purchased a single family home in Denver on a investment loan, so 25% down, probably since 2014. Why? Because it got too expensive. I started buying multifamily. But that's not to say that I don't recommend people that move here to buy single family homes, because I think the single family home market is going to remain strong for a very long time. And that's one of the things that we watch consistently, because for me, I like to buy in markets where the population is increasing. It's simple supply and demand economics. If people are moving there, if the population is increasing, it likely means that prices are going to continue to rise. As soon as population starts to decrease, I'm really analyzing my investment strategy. And I don't mean increase at the rate of inflation. I mean increase over inflation. Are people moving in to drive prices up? And I like to buy in markets where that's what's happening.
You mentioned Phoenix before too. So that's a market that I've been following. I know the Case-Shiller numbers this year, Phoenix was one of the hottest markets. Have you been investing there a long time, and are you kind of watching what's happening there too?
Yep. As a company, we were there. We bought in 2010, 11, and 12, sold out at the end of 2012, 2013, and started reinvesting there in 2018. And I don't know if you've seen the stats, but they say that Phoenix has increased 34% in the last 12 months. And I can tell you that the investments that I own an 8-plex and 3 4-plexes in Phoenix proper, and those have all crushed it over the last couple years. And I'm still buy heavy on Phoenix, and I would say, Phoenix does have a water issue. It's the desert, and the western half of the United States is in drought right now. I think that will change. I mean, obviously, I don't have a crystal ball, but the droughts tend to be cyclical. But if that continues for a long time, that could hurt the values of real estate. That said, Phoenix is one of those big cities, and when we moved there, started buying 2.5, 3 years ago, I was shocked at how low the prices were compared to what a big city it was. So again, there's some specific criteria in some areas we avoid, some areas we buy in, but we have an office there. We manage 500-600 doors from on our property management side in Phoenix, and are very, very buy heavy in that city, and have been for a few years now. Love that city. My wife wants to move there. It's too hot for me, but she wants to move there.
So Denver, Phoenix, what other markets are you looking at?
So I have offices in Denver, Phoenix, Tucson, Colorado Springs, Fort Collins, Salt Lake City, Boise. One of our business lines is in Las Vegas. We're strongly considering opening Reno and opening Kansas City.
Interesting. Yeah. Recently interviewed someone in Kansas City and excited about that market. You mentioned Boise. Wow. That market I feel like everyone from California has been going to Boise. So how long have you been in Boise, and what have you seen there?
So we've only been in Boise maybe 9 months, but same thing. It's basically the West Coast of the United States is fleeing. I mean, I think some of that is COVID related. I think some of that, whether you like to hear this or not, is political motivation related. I think some of that is just cost related. Look at the stats on San Francisco and look at what some of the crime bills have done to that city. It's made national news. And until that gets under control, I think people, not all people, I think some people are going to be like, this just isn't worth it. It's not worth the headache to live in these cities. And frankly, I grew up in Sacramento. I am a diehard San Francisco fan, sports fan. Love that city. I've been to, 40 some countries, and San Francisco is one of my all-time favorite cities on this planet, at least that I've been to. But it's a tragedy what's happening there right now. And all of those people leaving have been driving up Denver real estate for, 20 years. Denver, Salt Lake, Phoenix, Boise, as far away as Nashville, Austin, Reno, Kansas City. People are like, it's almost like the left and the left side of the United States, right side of the United States, the coastal cities, they're moving into the center and being like, look, this price just isn't worth it. And that again is one of the things we track, because I want to take advantage of the people that are moving to these cities and ride the appreciation story up. And as soon as that stops, because I do think it'll stop, and people will start moving back to the Bay Area and back to LA and back to San Diego, because those are fantastic places to be. It's just the current climate is kind of annoying, if you will.
Well, you mentioned Colorado Springs. I talked to somebody recently who said that there was a lot of people coming from Denver to Colorado Springs. Have you seen that movement from Denver? You mentioned Littleton before. Are you seeing movement out of the city as the city gets pricier?
Yeah, and I think this has been like almost like a COVID trend, where people are still moving to Denver, but they're not moving to Denver proper. They're moving to the burbs. And people that live in it, logically, if you think about it, and I'm not saying that I know this for a fact, it would just seem like people that are living in these high-rise condos, whether you rent or buy, and you're downtown in a downtown metro area, and you buy and you move in there so you could experience the city life or the parks or the ball games, and regardless of the city you're in. And now you're trapped in your apartment or in your condo because of COVID. You can't walk your dog, and everybody in Colorado owns dogs. You can't walk your dog. You can't take your kid out or kids out. You're stuck in there. The pool, the bar, the gym, they're all shut down because of COVID. Well, what do? You're like, I'm going to go buy a house in the burbs that at least has a yard in the back. And now I think that trend will come back. But that's what's happened. I mean, if people are moving out of the bigger cities and more importantly, the city centers into the burbs, and it's one of the factors that have fueled the rise in the prices in the suburbs. And it's a trend that we haven't seen before. And yes, I do think people are moving from Denver to Colorado Springs. I think that's also price driven. I also happen to think that COVID has taught us that people can work from home. So if you can work from home and you can telecommute, then you don't need to live in the city in which your company is located. You can do it from home. And if you only have to go into the office 1 or 2 days a week, but you can buy a bigger, better house 45 minutes away, you buy that bigger, better house 45 minutes away and deal with what's an actual commute only 1 or 2 days a week. I think that's one of the things contributing it too. And will that change? Yeah, because that's what happens. The only constant is change, and that'll change again, but that seems like what's happening. And I would, the prices aren't quite the same, but Boise and Colorado Springs are very similar kind of feels as cities. About the same size, not quite, but about the same size. Price point's about the same. Rental pool seems to be about the same. Both very conservative cities politically. So that's one of the reasons we like Boise so much, is it kind of reminds us of Colorado Springs.
Nice. So in each of these markets, do you have property managers, and are they in-house property managers, or are you contracting with people? How does that work?
When we expand cities, it's all Atlas employees. So that way we can teach people the Atlas way. Every now and then we will acquire a small property management company so that we can go in and have some scale to the property management side of the business. But for the most part, when we move into a city, not for the most part, when we move into a city, we want everybody to do it the Atlas way. And what that does, it allows us to have consistency on the property management side, the PM side, and it allows us to have consistency on the investor side, so that investors can trust whether they're buying an asset in Denver, Colorado Springs, Phoenix, Salt Lake, Kansas City, wherever, that the management's going to be the same. And that's that consistent message is very important to us.
So when you're buying properties, are you buying turnkey, or do you also have contractors and you're going through that sort of like value add fix up process? A
little bit of both. I can tell you that the 3 assets that I bought last year were all value add. The one that I personally bought in April was not value add. It was pretty much a set building, and the one that I'm currently under contract on going to buy is also not value add. It's pretty much a set building. Now, the reason that I did that is my projects that I bought 6 months ago, 8 months ago now, whatever it is, those are just a lot of friggin' work. And, I get, this is what I do, but I like to have a little bit of both, because when you're constantly doing value add, it just gets expensive. And that's not to say that I won't do it. And again, from our investors' perspective, one of the first things that we do is sit down and say, hey, what are you trying to accomplish? Are you an older person that just simply wants an annuity, so you're buying it and forgetting about it and you don't want to put work in? Or are a young person that you're trying to do a value add play to maximize your dollars, because you only have enough money to buy one deal? So that's part of the discovery process, if you will, just depending on what people want to do.
Let's talk a little bit about that. We talked about exit strategy earlier. How do you know when it's time to exit? Is it more based on what your plan is, or more based on what you're seeing in the market? I know we talked about not timing the market, but how do you know when it's time to let go?
I think it's really, really situational. Let me say it this way. So one of the things that I coach and teach on is each one of my children, I have 4 kids, a 10, a 9, a 5, and a 3. For each one of my kids, I bought a house and put it on a single family home and put it on a 15-year note, fixed rate, fully amortized note before they turned 3 years old, with the goal of when that kid hits 18 years old, that's their college fund. I never have to save money again. I never have to worry about it. I never have to save into it. That becomes their college fund. And I had those houses earmarked purely for college. Now, that said, one of the assets that I sold at the end of June, I sold a single family that I bought in 2004, and this is pre-kids. I just refinanced that particular house. I refinanced it into a 15-year note when my son was 2, my oldest son, and that became his college fund. Well, what happened is the market went absolutely crazy, and I had like $500,000 in equity in that one house. So that house was earmarked for his college, but it became almost draining because there was so much money that his college was already paid for by that house because it had increased so much. So what did I do? I sold it and I 1031 exchanged it into something that will still pay for his college. So I didn't lose sight of the original goal, and I wasn't taking money out of my son's, so to speak, pocket. Still pays for college. There's just better uses of that money. So when I buy it as though I'm never going to sell it, but then I'm constantly checking my strategy. Is this the right market to own in? Do I still like this market? Do I still like this asset? Is it performing the way I want it to perform? Is it underperforming or overperforming? So I don't want to say that there's a specific, let me say it this way. I used to think my goal when I was a younger investor, I'd say, okay, man, when I got 100 doors, I am done. And now 100 doors is, I'm way closer than I ever thought I would be. With this next purchase, I'll have in the high 70s in terms of door count. So now I'm like, 100 doors is imminent. Now, it may not happen for 2 years or 5 years or 1 year, I don't know. But getting to 100 isn't my goal anymore. And that's the other thing with goals is goals constantly change. Why? Because life changes. Kids, goals, jobs, money. If I were to lose my job tomorrow, my goals would immediately change. And maybe not my goals, but the manner in which I manage my properties would immediately change. As an example, my CPA, and I'm going to share this because it makes me happy, but my CPA, I do a bunch of cost segregation and all my stuff. And about, 3-4 months ago, she's like, I hope you saved because you're going to owe the IRS about $135,000 for 2020. And I was like, what? Very frustrated. She sent me my tax returns finally today because we filed an extension and all that good stuff. And she's like, oh, you're going to owe a little less than 40 total. And I was like, that's like finding $100,000. Now, it's all my money, but I'm way happier with owing 40 than I am 140 for obvious reasons. There's a 6-digit reason to be happy with that. But it's, my plans change. When she said, hey, how are you going to, what do you have with $140,000? Well, I don't just keep $140,000 sitting in cash in my bank because that would be a waste of money. I go buy real estate. So $140,000, I was like, I got to move some stuff around. $40,000, way different. And that's what I mean when life throws you curveballs. You just got to be ready to pivot and be very honest with yourself in terms of what to do next.
Absolutely. I want to pivot a little bit and talk about Atlas specifically because I noticed on the website that you've been working with Zillow since 2018 on iBuying. At Millionacres, we've been studying iBuying and watching all the players, but what has that been like from your perspective?
Zillow is no short of amazing. I love what they're doing. I love the fact that they're helping the consumer because in the end, this is all driven by the fact that they are trying to make the consumer experience to buy and sell real estate better. And that's it. And anybody that says they're hurting the industry is usually saying that from a very selfish perspective. Now, I have the ability to say it from a selfish perspective. They're helping the industry because they're also helping us because they are a client of ours. But that said, I think what Zillow is doing is no short of amazing. They're not, there's a lot of press right now about, it was both on CNN and Fox News in the last few days, articles on both sides of the aisle talking about institutional investors coming in and squeezing out, first-time home buyers and Americans. And whether that's true or not true, we can talk about that in a second if you'd like. But Zillow is not doing that. Zillow is actually helping the transaction. They're trying to help the consumer, regardless of what people think. Are they squeezing out realtors? Are they not squeezing out realtors? I don't happen to think that they are. In general, maybe some feel that way, but that's not their stated mission. And I think Zillow is great. I think it's great for the industry. I think it's great for consumers. They're streamlining the process, and I love what they're doing. And I hope that I would say that even if I wasn't working with them, because I believe in the mission that they're trying to accomplish.
Aren't they also selling a lot of their properties to institutional investors, though?
I don't know. Here's what they're doing. They're not owning anything. They are selling everything they buy, they turn around and sell. If the institutions buy them, they're not picking and choosing based on who's buying. They're just trying to sell the houses. So if the institutions are buying, that's not what Zillow has created. That's what institutions have created. Think of Zillow every time they sell a house is no different than you or I. They happen to be a very big entity. They're just simply selling a house. And they're not allowed to discriminate, just like we aren't, as to who's buying the house. So that's not, I would make the argument that those two things, Zillow and institutions, are not, it might be a byproduct, but it's not the goal.
Let's talk a little bit about what I saw on Atlas, which is that you talk about the virtuous cycle, which is turning renters to homeowners into investors who then offer properties to renters and so on and so forth in a circle. Why is that your mission? And also, why is that important for communities?
So to take a step back, when I started buying real estate, personally, I was trying to protect myself financially, trying to protect myself if my boss fired me, trying to protect myself. I didn't grow up with a lot of money. I went to a good school. My parents struggled and sent my brother and I to an all-boys prep school. When I went to four-year university, my parents helped, but I had an academic scholarship, and I still got out of school with roughly $25,000 in student loans, which I'm well aware is way cheaper than a lot of students today. But still, $25,000 20 years ago was a lot of money. It's a lot of money today. It was a lot of money 20 years ago when I graduated. And people don't have enough money to retire. And one of the things that we're trying to solve using real estate is this issue of retirement. And one of the things that we help and coach and teach on is strategic buying to help either create retirement or supplement the retirement that you already have. We could go into, I've got ways to buy real estate inside an IRA with a fully amortized bank loan. It is the slickest retirement planning on the history of the planet in terms of returns. But for the purposes of this, we don't need to go there today. What I can say is that our mission to uplift humanity is all humanity. So what we've grown into is taking our tenants and saying, hey, you rent houses from us. We want to coach you and teach you how to become buyers. Because the fact of the matter is, most Americans' number one source of wealth creation is their home. And we want to coach people and teach people how to do that. So the virtuous cycle starts with our tenants. And if we show them how to be better stewards of their money, it helps all of society and it uplifts the community. It uplifts all humanity. It gives people a reason to get up and go to work. It gives people some pride of ownership, and they can buy. So they rent from us, then they can buy, and then they turn into investors, and that is the virtuous cycle. And it's watching people that are first-time home buyers that are in their mid-40s that never thought they could buy a house, that turn around and buy a house. Holy moly. I have chills right now because I can picture some of these people's faces where like, I never thought this was possible. It's like, it is possible. You just got to know the game. So one of the things we do is we teach people the game. And we do it very openly, very honestly with our owners that own the real estate. We say, look, we are going to coach and we are going to teach people how to buy houses. We're not trying to hide this from anybody. We're trying to create this community, because when people own, when they have pride of ownership, it uplifts humanity, and it uplifts the communities, and it also teaches the children of the people that are owners that they can do this too. And not just one race or another race, all people, all education level. Because you don't need to be a genius to buy a house. And everybody thinks that it's complicated. And once you learn the rules, you can take steps necessary. It may take 2 years. You can fix your credit. You can get more income. You can quit buying new cars. You can quit being a consumer and learn to be an investor. And if you learn these tricks and learn these trades, holy moly, the future is bright. And that's why we do that.
Oh, I just love that. I think especially the part about showing children what's possible is so important. We've talked a lot on other podcasts about how to increase home ownership rates, so that it's all equitable. And, it really does start with education. This is pretty much an awesome place to end it. I just wanted to ask you one more question, because you mentioned the 100 doors. You're moving past that. What's next? Are you looking to, retire early? A lot of people have that goal in real estate. Are you going for 200 doors? What are you thinking?
So I would simply say that I haven't defined what my goal is. I've sort of noodling this new thing in my head where it'd be really fun someday if one of my kids or multiple of my kids go to school, go to college, go out in the real world, get kicked in the teeth, because I want you to go learn what the real world's like, and then maybe come back and maybe we have a family office. Maybe I become an author, something that I've thought about. Maybe do some sort of speaker circuit. I love coaching and teaching. The real estate just affords me the financial freedom, but retiring, I would be bored out of my mind. I love what we do. And the joke that I make is I have little kids. They have to go to college. I love to travel, or my kids have to go to school. So I can't retire until my kids go to college anyway. I don't like golf that much, and my liver would explode because I'd party my face off if I didn't have a job. And my wife would be like, get out of my house. So no, but in all seriousness, I don't think there's a defined goal. As long as this remains fun, I will continue to do it. And we're having a ball. I love coaching people and teaching people and watching, whether it's the virtuous cycle or the investor, like watching that aha moment, watching that light bulb go off in their head. We're like, holy moly, you mean I can do this too? It's like, yeah, you can. Is it scary? Yes. Is working till you die scarier? Absolutely. And everybody listening knows this. That first purchase on an investment is freaking nerve-wracking, but it's also addicting. And it's one of those ones, the second one, you're like, this isn't that hard. And then the third one, you're like, this is awesome. And then when your family and friends start coming to you being like, what are you into? What is this? Then you get to coach and teach again. And that part I absolutely love.
Well, thank you so much for coaching and teaching us today. This was fantastic. Reminder to listeners, you can learn more about Mike at realatlas.com. You can always email us at media@millionacres to share your thoughts. Stay well and stay invested.
Thank you for tuning in to the Millionacres Podcast. I hope you liked today's show. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider subscribing through your favorite podcast provider. If you have any questions, please feel free to drop us a line at help@millionacres.com. Stay well and stay invested. People on this program may have an interest in the deals, offerings, or services they discuss that Millionacres or the Motley Fool may have a formal recommendation for or against. Always consult a certified tax professional before acting on tax advice, and do not buy or sell assets based solely on what you hear.